Hi, I'm going to look at a few things concerning nuclear power, and the first thing is I shouldn't use the word accident. These things are just human-made disasters, debacles, terrorist groups. There's accident is not a word to use with this. Just use the word meltdown, which they never really use the word meltdown.
The accident at Chernobyl NPP Unit 4 destroyed the reactor core and significant part of the technical equipment and building. It was necessary as soon as possible to provide a barrier on the way of very powerful radioactive releases, especially intensive within the first 10 days after the accident. The governmental commission decided to start dropping from the helicopter.
So they started sending in all these helicopters with various mechanisms to dump various materials. And I'm pretty sure there were no Politburo members in these helicopters. 600 or probably way more of these helicopter people died doing this. And there were no one percenters up there. Just like in Japan, there aren't any parliament members going in to use a shovel in there.
Materials intended to localize the sources of releases into the reactor shaft. During the first day, 45 flights were performed. On April the 28th, pilot helicopter 90 times flew to the Unit 4, and by May the 1st, the number of flights was increased in 15 times.
So they can't really have a plan for this. This stuff happens and everybody starts jumping up and down and trying to do stuff. So the Russians appeared to be trying to do a lot of different things to slow down this reaction, as where the Japanese helicopter pilots started flying in there, and they must have learned from the Russians, and they said, no, we're not flying in there anymore. So none of this was ever really attempted. A little water was dropped on Fukushima, but that's about it.
This facility was built as a localizing encasement for hundreds and hundreds tons of fuel-containing materials formed as a result of the explosion.
So this all except is a diagram of Chernobyl, and I don't see any water buckets up here storing fuel above the reactor. So whatever people say about how bad Russian designs are, I don't see a bunch of water buckets above the reactor. I suppose it's possible they could be in the far back or in this area that's not shown, but it looks better than the GE design, which has all the water buckets right above it with all the fuel. This doesn't have any sound, but this shows 2 weeks after the disaster. It's still bubbling away. There's no water hoses spraying anything on here. This is all water from the water buckets or the reactors, and it's, look at that, 2 weeks later. So what do you think happened in those 2 weeks? One breath of that, you'd be done. And they show this shooting horizontally. This is 2 weeks later. So is it coming out of the reactor vessel? Is it coming out of one of the water buckets? Not sure. Oops. So this is reactor 2. They've got a camera in there, and you can see there's not much left underneath the unit. This is all those fantastic control rods that keep the reactor in control. So that's, look at that. That's just nothing there to do except get away from it. Okay, this is reactors 3 and 4. This is June 2011, so about 3 months after the disaster, the human-made disaster. And look at these things bubbling. How can there be anything left in those? Look at all that just going up in the air. Now, this is a nuclear fuel bundle, and this looks like it was just taken out of the reactor and they're putting it in here to cool, but unfortunately these didn't have 5 years of water to cool them down because of the earthquake, which is a disaster because no one really planned for it. Now here's inside, they say 4, but I think there might be one of the pools left in 4 and not another. That's what I'm starting to come up with, but I'll have to work on that. So maybe there was a pool in there they worked on, but look at how it's not corroded, but it's all melted and burnt. And look at all the holes. There's no pellets in there. How is that spent fuel? There's nothing there. I think it all boiled off or whatever the heck it did. And this is, okay, 2012. And I just want to watch this bubble come up. There's a bubble, because it's hard to tell if these are bubbles or what's going on in here. Right there, there's a big bubble coming up. So this stuff's still hot, apparently after it's been covered. So if it was hot when it was not covered, that's why all this stuff's corroded and burnt and melted, because it all just bubbled off. I mean, maybe anyway. Now this, so when you look at this, where does all this stuff go? It's like, well, it goes up in the air and then comes down to rain on us, or we breathe it in. I'm sure I've breathed some in. So this all goes up in the air, and this is, you know, relatively close to Tokyo. So here is a person who sent a air filter from their apartment on the 20th floor from a Tokyo apartment complex.
Nuclides, and it says show nuclides, okay? So we can ask it to do that position. From the...
So my little instrument measures gamma, but the spectral analyzer will give you all of the various daughter elements from all these reactions. So this guy is measuring that air filter from Japan.
Some serious stuff floating around Japan. Anyway, thank you very much for listening to me, and I'll talk to you again. This is the gamma spectrum of the sample that we scraped from the filter, and we can now ask the program to analyze these peaks that you see, and I'll just do that. Ask for full analysis, and you see that the program is running across the peaks here, and each one of these peaks comes out at a particular position
it's really fuzzy, you just have to listen to them.
In terms of its energy, and then we'll get an analysis. Now here's the spectrum analysis. It tells us what's in the sample, and we can see immediately that the sample contains cesium-134, and here we have 42,000 becquerels per kilogram, and cesium-137 we have 68,000 becquerels per kilogram. And also interestingly, you see here we have a lot of lead-210. Now lead-210 is a very interesting radionuclide. It's normally natural decay product of radium-226, but here we've got far too much of it. We've got 7,500 here, 7,500 becquerels per kilogram of lead-210, and that's almost certainly from the reactor, because there's no bismuth-214 there, which is what we would expect if it was natural. And also there's thorium-234. Now look at that, that's the daughter of uranium-238, so that's giving us 3,000 becquerels per kilogram of uranium-238, and there's also uranium-235. We've got 240 becquerels per kilogram of uranium-235, so far too much. Now we're going to ask this to put in the nuclides, so we'll do that. Here we are, nuclide.
So it's much more than you think in the air. This is Wayne Steiger, and he's got some interesting ideas on the world.
What I was trying to show people, the evidence is here. The Pacific Ocean is becoming a dead zone. And right now, I wouldn't advise anyone, well, it's really, we don't eat any more fish that comes out of the Pacific. We just don't. That includes, one of my favorites was Alaskan king crab. But look at this. This is what the problem is. And it's all connected, Steve.
So here's a different way to look at the water cycle, in that it all moves all over the world. Besides evaporating and raining, it moves all over the world. It's got lower, colder currents and upper, warmer currents. So everything's mixed. And when you get all that stuff mixed, then you can go to a weather chart and see the radiation. Here's NOAA showing water vapor or rainfall on July 26th, 27th. So a lot in New Mexico. See if the readings are up in New Mexico. Don't know of any readings to get in Mexico. It's New Mexico. '26th, 2:39 in the afternoon, or well, GMT, whatever. 2:21. And then this is probably the area where they had those early nuclear stuff going on in the 60s, and they just dumped it into the streams near Los Angeles. So going back to the 1%ers in Japan, they keep getting these homeless people off the streets, then they train them for a couple weeks, then they send them in for half-hour work, and then they probably come out and croak. So it's a terrorist organization killing people off all the time. Okay, more happy news to follow.